Hello and a very warm welcome to another edition of Talking Germany, the show where we do just that. And my guest today is a musician, a lawyer and a man who went down in history as the last leader of the former East Germany, and he is Lothar de Maizière. Thank you very, very much for joining us today here on Talking Germany. Thank you. Now, Lothar de Maizière wasn't just the last leader of the former communist state. He was, in fact, the only democratically elected prime minister of what we once knew as the GDR. Lothar de Maizière, the last leader, the democratic final leader of East Germany.
Not a communist country, a democratic one.
OK. The last leader, nevertheless, of what we knew as East Germany. I'd like to begin by asking you what do you remember about East Germany?
No, ich bin in Ostdeutschland groß geworden.
I grew up in Eastern Germany. I was 5 years old when the war came to an end. I was in Thüringen at the time. Thüringen was initially occupied by the Americans, then the Russians came. Essentially, this was the East Germany, the GDR, that left its mark on me. I see how many Easterners try to negate that. But I consciously say, this is my life and I stand by my past.
It's your life, it's your culture, it's your background. What do you miss?
My background is that I come from a liberal Christian family that always adhered to the Huguenot tradition. My family moved from France to Brandenburg more than 300 years ago because they wanted to stay true to their Protestant faith. That led to a fundamental conviction that remained part of my family's ethos in East Germany, too. I was very heavily influenced by music. That was my profession. Again, through the church. Even as a child, Johann Sebastian Bach was my god, the fifth evangelist. Actually, during the East German era, I was something of a dinosaur, a bourgeois relic. But that was something I could live with.
Ein Fossil, ein bourgeoises Überbleibsel, aber auch das konnte man leben.
A fascinating introduction to the... Interesting stuff. We've got the musician, we've got the lawyer, and we've got the politician. Let's begin with the musician. Your choice of instrument, what does it tell us about you as a person?
Ich habe als Kind zunächst mit Klavier begonnen.
As a child, I started off learning the piano, but it didn't really appeal to me. I wanted to be able to create and shape the sound. I wanted a cello, but it wasn't possible to get a hold of one after the war. Then our family doctor said he had a violin for me. I later swapped it for the viola because the timbre is closer to that of the cello. I'm a viola player out of conviction, if you like. I like the fact that you're positioned in the center of the harmony, that your instrument steers the tonality in a major or a minor direction, and that it can sometimes add a rather tragic, serious hue to the color of a piece. For me, playing in a string quartet is the pinnacle of all music making. And as a viola player, you're not as exposed as the first violin.
Some fascinating insights into the character of Lothar de Maizière there. Now, you broke off your career as a musician, we saw. You became a lawyer. You became a lawyer in a country that was East Germany, where the system of law has been questioned by some people. In today's Germany, they say that East Germany was a country based on a fundamental lack of principles of law. Yeah? Ein Unrechtsstaat is the word they use here in Germany.
Ich halte diese Bezeichnung Unrechtsstaat für verkürzt.
I think describing it as an illegitimate state is short-sighted. It focuses on a black and white debate. and black and white statements are never accurate. East Germany was not a constitutional state in the sense of a state such as today's Federal Republic that adheres to a legal structure. But certain legal aspects were comparable. Theft was theft, fraud was fraud, and murder was murder, and stupid tenancy disputes were conducted just as bitterly. The problem was the criminal procedure. And back to my character, a while ago I was asked what word would best sum me up. I said, representative. As a viola player, you're a representative. As an attorney, you're a representative. And as a politician, I felt as though I was representing my fellow East Germans. I've never stood for myself. I've always tried to stand for others. And that for me was what being an attorney in East Germany was all about. In such a state as this, you weren't just an attorney in the legal sense. At the same time, you were also a companion, a pastor, a counselor.
And somebody who talks to the Stasi.
Sure, I had to talk to the Stasi on several occasions. The investigating authority in political criminal proceedings was the Stasi, just as it was in political cases, large-scale white-collar crime, and the prosecution of former Nazi crimes.
So it was normal to talk to the Stasi, the former secret police.
It was a normal state authority, although it was a particularly sprawling one. So I couldn't choose my opposite number. Just as in a regular theft case, I couldn't choose which detective was working on it. I also couldn't choose the investigating authority. After reunification, all the cases I had worked on during the East German era were closely scrutinized to see if I had betrayed any of my clients. They found nothing.
Okay, we'll leave that subject there. The wall fell in 1989. You can remember, I'm sure, the evening of the 9th of November. What did you think would happen next?
It was strange. On November the 9th, I was in the French cathedral at the Gendarmenmarkt, in the church of my forefathers, if you like. It was a discussion on the future of East Germany. A young man came in and said, "The wall has fallen." There was great excitement. But the man chairing the debate said that two of the groups still had to speak, so that we should stay seated. I had two thoughts on that evening. Firstly, I hoped that there would be no bloodshed. And secondly, I had a sense that we had reached a turning point. Both turned out to be correct. I always say that the 20th century ended on November the 9th.
Well, the events in the main period we're talking about today were the few critical months from the fall of the wall through to reunification in October 1990. And they're currently the subject of an exhibition at the German Historical Museum here in the heart of Berlin. It's called The Path to Unification. You talked about your role as a Stellvertreter, as a deputy just now. You were very close to Helmut Kohl. What did you make of him in this historic phase?
We're both very different. He weighs a good deal more than me, for a start. And he's a person who takes an expansive, far-reaching view of things, while I, as an attorney and also as a musician, tend to be obsessed with details. To that extent, we both had very different ways of thinking and doing things. He's a typical Rhineland Catholic, and I'm a typical Prussian Protestant. We worked well together, but there was no male bonding.
Okay. Would Helmut Kohl is viewed here in Germany and internationally as the Chancellor of German reunification. Would it have happened without Helmut Kohl?
I believe he was rightly dubbed the Unity Chancellor. But when I recently celebrated my 70th birthday, Angela Merkel said I was the Unity Attorney. Not such a bad title either.
Tell me about Angela Merkel. You appointed her. or you proposed her for Helmut Kohl back then, yeah? He was looking for a young East German woman to join his cabinet, right?
She served in my administration as a spokeswoman. Even then, she stood out as someone with great analytical abilities. Her approach is very scientific. She's not a typical humanist. After the first elections for both East and West Germany, Helmut Kohl told me he was planning to give a soft portfolio to an East German woman. That was 3 quotas at the same time.
Those were his words.
So I said, why don't you take Dr. Merkel? I think she's absolutely up to the job. So he did, and I don't think he ever regretted it. Maybe her first portfolio was a kind of practice run, but she was a fantastic environment minister who also set international standards.
Okay, she was a woman and she was a minister. She was an East German woman. Is she an East German chancellor?
I don't think she's an East German chancellor. She's a German chancellor. Our politicians are no longer described as either East German or West German. Now they're just German politicians. Last year, we were still talking about 60 years of the Federal Republic, and no one mentioned the fact that of those 60 years, a third applied to the whole of Germany. We've already been together for 20 years. The Ossi-Wessi question is still pertinent to my generation, but not to university students today, for example.
Good thing too. Good thing too. Let's go back to Helmut Kohl just a little bit. On the day that the Deutschmark was introduced in Germany, he talked about this very famous quote: blooming landscapes. Do you think that at that time, when he made that comment, did he believe it?
Well, at the time, I argued for much greater caution in the introduction of the Deutschmark. I said we were facing a difficult time, but it would get better. But what we didn't appreciate was that German unity was actually a byproduct of the collapse of the Soviet Union, and that this would lead to the economic collapse of the East as a whole. And that's why German unity turned out to be much more expensive and much more difficult than initially thought. But now anyone who looks at the old East German cities will realize that they are flourishing.
Aha. Well, let's focus on one of those German towns that Lothar de Maizière is talking about, the eastern German town of Halberstadt. It's located in the Harz Mountains region, which has, in some important ways, the city itself certainly bloomed and blossomed in recent years. Still, it's far from clear whether or not the town really has a rosy future.
The A38 highway between Leipzig in the east and Göttingen in the west is part of the infrastructural facelift that came with German unification. The road links the east and west, leading past fields filled with flowers, as famously promised by Chancellor Helmut Kohl in 1990.
I'm sure that in 3 to 5 years, the landscapes of eastern Germany will be blooming.
20 years on, German unification has cost a cool 1.6 trillion euros. That includes the price tag for the A38 highway, which alone cost 4 million euros per kilometre. Halfway along the road lies the city of Halberstadt. Its elegant architecture once earned it the nickname Little Paris. That was long ago. As a result of communist urban planning, the city was neglected. This is what Halberstadt looked like 20 years ago.
By current standards, we wouldn't have been able to restore the place. The city had lost its face and we would have merely continued the demolition process the communists started. But that wasn't possible for political reasons. People wouldn't have understood why.
Today, Halberstadt has regained some of its charm. Rainer Schönle proudly shows us how much things have changed in 2 decades. Halberstadt was lucky. It was chosen as a model for reconstruction. That made it easier to get the 100 million euros the city needed to finance the process. This is the western city of Cologne, where the city council has run out of money. The roads need repair, and many buildings are crumbling. People here don't talk about unification success. Instead, many feel too much is spent on the east.
I think we could use that money here.
That's better than sending it all to the east for building roads. Take a look at what's going on in the Ruhr Valley. It's terrible.
I don't think you can talk of cost when you're dealing with values like national unity.
Everything's new there. Here it's falling apart.
Back in the east, Halberstadt looks great, but it's empty. So Discover the Emptiness is a fitting name for this installation. It's Halberstadt's contribution to the International Architecture Exhibition. The population of Eastern German cities is in decline. Rebuilding can't replace the fact that there are so few jobs. The young and well-qualified people are moving away, leaving neat, empty cities behind them. And for all the people who are going where the work is, roads like the A38 are one-way streets heading west.
Lothar de Maizière, the town of Halberstadt was destroyed in an Allied bombing raid. The city centre was destroyed in the Second World War, as I'm sure you know. It was rebuilt East German style, but a lot of the beautiful old buildings around the town centre were left to fall into decay, as we've seen there. The question, I suppose, is, were the East German authorities just blind to history?
No, at least not as far as tangible history was concerned. The history of Brandenburg and Saxony, it was factored out. It went up to the Reformation, and then it started on the history of the labor movement. But the parlous state of the cities was due to the fact that East Germany was a poor country, a poor state. They say that an economy is only healthy if around 50% of production is accumulated or invested and 50% consumed. In the end, the ratio of government expenditure to GDP in East Germany was 83%. We fought with the state for money to repair our churches. We said it must at least maintain the roofs and guttering to prevent the structure itself from being ruined by damp. One of the greatest satisfactions for me is that our historic towns and villages are being restored. And that's why I've been very glad to serve as the chairman of the Berlin Monument Conservation Foundation for the past few years. We've renovated various old gateways in Berlin, the Charlottenburg Gate, for example. Buildings are the city's memory.
OK, and lots of good things have happened. Lots of money has been spent on restoring old buildings, on restoring whole city centres, as we've seen in the case of Halberstadt. But still people are leaving places like Halberstadt. Just explain for our foreign viewers why people are leaving in such numbers.
The biggest problem is that the blooming landscapes were not followed up with jobs. Instead, we saw a total collapse of the labour market. Even today, jobless figures in the East are twice as high as in Western German states. In particular, there just aren't enough jobs for qualified people. This means that young, qualified workers, above all women, who are much more flexible these days, head west. There are entire regions in the East where the young men are sitting around with nothing to do in the evenings. The West German demographic problem is serious, but we're only halfway towards solving it, and it will eventually start affecting Germany as a whole. It's not just a problem in Germany. It's also one in other European countries too, and without immigration and integration, we won't be able to solve it.
I think you're probably right. Lothar de Maizière, on that thoughtful note, I think we'll wind it up. We're moving slowly towards the end of the programme. And at the end of the programme here on Talking Germany, we traditionally have a sort of a quick-fire quiz where I give you a question and you give me an answer. You've got two alternatives. What is, question number one, what is your natural environment, the concert chamber or the political chamber, the debating chamber?
The concert hall.
Helmut Kohl or Angela Merkel?
Angela Merkel.
Aha. Communism or capitalism?
In between, the social market economy.
Good answer, the German answer, yeah. Should transfer payments to the East from the West continue, or has enough been done?
I believe we'll stop this migration from East to West at some point, and that we won't think in terms of East and West, but of North and South.
In Ost- und Westdenken sein, in Deutschdenken, Nord und Süd.
And On that note, we've got to leave it there on that very positive note with Lothar de Maizière, a thoughtful, a very interesting guest, a man who has made history. If you've enjoyed his company as much as I have, then do come back next week. Thank you.